welcome to the Missoula in Motion Annual Transportation Best Practice Awards. I'm Alexandria Stockman, the Program Supervisor for Missoula in Motion. Today is a celebration of the best transportation programs implemented this year by you, the businesses, organizations, and institutions of Missoula. This celebration would not be possible without taking a moment to thank our supporters and sponsors. So I'd like to thank ALPS. They are the stewards of this lovely room. The Holiday Inn downtown at the park for providing accommodations for our speaker. MCAT for documenting this auspicious occasion. Two Sisters Catering for creating our lovely lunch. And our panel of judges who had the difficult task of selecting the 2011 award winners. The theme for today's program is Community Transportation, Spheres of Influence. We would like to take a moment to mention some of the transportation accomplishments within our spheres of influence this past year. At Missoula in Motion, we registered over 475 new members in our Way to Go Club. We co-hosted Sunday Streets Missoula twice this past year with an average attendance of over 6,000 participants. We launched a new website, which we hope you all love, with a new commuter logging system. We also saw a 69% increase over last year's participation in our annual commuter challenge. And our members reduced over 1.2 million pounds of carbon dioxide in 2011. So congratulations on those accomplishments. We couldn't do that without you. Within our community, we've also seen a creation of new trails, particularly the Milwaukee Trail extension and the Silver Park Trail. We've seen new projects on bike lane striping with sharrows on a lot of our roadways throughout Missoula. Mountain Lion launched Wi-Fi and a bus tracker technology and recorded record ridership numbers for several months this past year. The OPG Transportation Division completed an update of the active transportation plan, and Lolo Trail received grant funding for a feasibility study to expand and broaden our transportation resources outside the city of Missoula. At the state level, we've also seen some accomplishments. We've seen new leadership at the Department of Transportation. Billings passed complete streets resolutions, and there's been a creation of a statewide bike ped advocacy group, the called Bike Walk Montana. As you listen today, we ask that you consider what your spheres of influence are as you make choices about transportation. They could be at home with your spouse, partner, or children, or in your personal life, maybe your neighbors, sports teams, or book club, or at work. Could you influence your colleagues, clients, department, or institution? We all make choices about transportation on a daily basis, and again, we ask you, how far will you take your sphere of influence? Our speaker today is Paul Zajkowski, and he will help us connect our spheres of influence. Paul has been the Director of Land Use and Transportation Programs at the Local Government Commission in Sacramento, and has managed its Center for Livable Communities since 1995. Paul has experience in land use, air quality, and transportation planning, gained while working at the City Development Agency, an Air Quality Management District, and a Council of Governments. He is co-author of documents on transit-oriented development and street design, and has edited numerous documents on sustainable development and community design. During the past 4 years, Paul has directed a first-of-its-kind project in collaboration with the California Department of Health Services to promote physical activity by improving the design of pedestrian environment. He currently directs the League of Government Commission's Active Living Leadership Project and is part of a national innovative, program supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I do ask that you continue to enjoy your lunch while we hear from Paul. And should the need arise, there are restrooms located back out into the atrium. Women's are to the right, and men's are up the short flight of stairs by the coat rack to the left. So thank you all very much for coming today. And Paul?
I apologize for speaking while you eat, but hopefully some of you can, and a lot of my presentation is very visual, so it does help if you can actually see what it is I'm talking about. I'm going to expand, I think, this discussion on spheres of influence to really talk a lot about what the work that we do, which is with local government. As our name implies, we are a nonprofit organization that works with local government. We're a fairly unique entity in that we actually start out as a state commission working on solar energy back in the first Jerry Brown administration 30-some years ago, and then became a private nonprofit when we bring together local elected officials and staff to really think about how to create more livable communities. And in 1991 started working on land use, so now it's our 20th anniversary doing that. I've been there 16 years working on these issues. And a lot of our work on land use and transportation planning really began with what we call the Awani principles. These were a set of principles that talked about the need to create walkable, bicycle-friendly, transit-friendly communities by really going back to sort of traditional patterns of development. What we see in this area, for example, of Missoula, well-connected street network, higher density development, very walkable, neighborhoods nearby that support that kind of development as well by being well connected, by having access close by to goods and services. And we talked about the need for having that central focus in the downtown, but also having those neighborhoods where you'd have a neighborhood center that people could come around. The Awani principles were so named because they were presented first at a conference at the Awani Hotel in Yosemite National Park back in 1991. This, as I said, started our work on land use and transportation. We created the Center for Livable Communities in 1993. We've seen many cities in California and other parts of the country adopt some of these concepts and ideas into their plans and projects. And since 2001 have organized a national conference on these issues in collaboration with US EPA called the New Partners for Smart Growth Conference. Our work, and I'm going to focus in a little bit more on the health connections to all of this, because I think in the last decade we've really gotten a much better understanding of the importance of the way we design our communities and how it impacts the health of people who live there. And this started back actually about 10, 11 years ago working with the Department of Health Services in California, where we developed a series of fact sheets on why walkable communities actually are healthier communities. We also went on to work a fair amount with the Health Department and Transportation Department on Safe Routes to School, which our state actually initiated in 1999 before the national program came into effect several years later. And a lot of the reason why we talk about this, some of you may recognize this particular street. This is a photo that my friend Dan Burden gave to me some years ago. He likes to point out that there's still one pedestrian left standing on this street. And Dan tells a story that he went back 3 days later and that person was still standing there. Now I'm told that that street now doesn't look that way anymore. So we see progress occurring in many places. But basically what we want to do is get away from these types of environments that are only created for people in cars. We want environments where people can get out and walk, people can get out and bicycle, people can use transit, where people of all ages and abilities can get around in our communities, something that is so, so critical. We've created streets that are often so ugly that nobody wants to face out onto those streets, so we put our walls on them. I refer to these as traffic sewers. They're basically just there to move the traffic. Not a particularly pleasant place to walk or have your children go to school on a street like that. We also have, in suburban areas especially, we've created intersections that are so far apart that people are forced to cross mid-block and put themselves in harm's way. Intersections, of course, is where we have to handle all the volume of traffic, and we have to make those bigger and bigger. And we end up with intersections that look like this, where you can barely make out the walk, don't walk sign. And instead, it probably should say, on your marks, get set, go. Some communities have just given up on sidewalks altogether, as we see in this town in the San Francisco Bay Area. And of course, transit often is relegated to not even secondary, but tertiary standing in many of our communities with just barely a bench and clearly not enough space for people to get by on the sidewalk. And even though we focus a lot of attention on the next generation and the safety of our children, this photo is taken from a school in my county, in Sacramento County, and you can see we don't even have a sidewalk for these kids to walk to and from that school. In some communities, we've built our residential streets so wide that the first complaint people have when they move into this neighborhood is, what? People are speeding on my street, because we've by design created a street that feels comfortable for people to speed on. So while we focused a lot in this country on standard of living, and we often focus on how important and how high that is, we've really neglected the other side of the equation, which is quality of life. And if you look at international measures of quality of life, many U.S. cities don't even show up till the 30s or 40s. We really have not paid enough attention to creating really good quality of life in our communities that support all the modes of transportation that we're talking about here today. In some regions where, again, we've got concentrated development, like the LA region, the freedom we once had of driving in a car has vanished, as we are now spending a lot of our time stuck in traffic or on suburban arterial roadways like this one in the Denver region, where people are now, as they've spread out further and further, are driving more and more miles. And we see these numbers reflected at the national level. This is from 1970 to 2000, about a 40% population growth, but our vehicle miles traveled going up by 4 times that amount. If we look at a more recent period of time, from 77 to 07, looks a little bit better, but still much greater increase in vehicle miles traveled. We've spread out further. We're using our cars for more and more trips. The amount of land, and of course in California our population has been growing. We can justify to some extent the expansion we've seen in use of land, but in many regions of the country population has declined, and yet we've still seen more consumption of land at the national level, about 2.5 times greater urbanization of land than increase in population over that period. And this only goes up to 1990. It doesn't have a more recent period. Some areas are even considering things like this: 23 lanes of traffic. Anybody want to guess which region we're talking about here? Nope, Atlanta, the poster child for sprawl. And at a certain point, I think we all recognize you cannot build your way out of the congestion. Every new lane mile you add is going to be occupied by more cars as people use that lane to move further and further out. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of the car culture. You know, when cars first came on the scene, they were referred to as the greatest health-giving invention of 1,000 years. Car trips were considered good for the liver and were actually prescribed to treat tuberculosis. In 1899, Scientific American predicted that cars would eliminate a greater part of the nervousness, distraction, and strain of modern metropolitan life. Pretty different when we look back, 100 plus years at that. And of course, cars have given us, great convenience and a lot of other things, but they also have come with some unintended consequences. And one of the things that we've been, in the transportation world, been thinking over the years is that, well, the increase in vehicle miles traveled has just been this constant, you see this linear progression over the years. We just have to keep building more capacity for that. The interesting thing is that it's actually tapered off. Even before the economic decline of a few years ago, we started seeing that leveling off of vehicle miles traveled. And as a result, I think, and even before we consider that, we need to start thinking about how do we maintain the roadway system we have better, and how do we not expand what's out there, and how do we use other modes to make more efficient trips in our communities. The other side of this, which I'm going to talk about briefly, is the health consequences, one of the big unintended consequences of the way we've built our communities, and that is the obesity epidemic that we're facing in this country. A really serious issue, particularly when we look at the associated illnesses that come along with overweight and obesity. And this study in particular, I think, should bring us, all to think deeply about this, and that is that children born today, 1 out of 3 children born today are expected to get diabetes in their lifetime. If you ask somebody in the medical profession, what was that, a generation ago, 30 years ago, it was 1 in 50 children born. that would get diabetes in their lifetime. So we've gone from 1 in 50 to 1 in 3. And if you're Latino or African American, it actually goes up to almost 1 in 2 children born today expected to get that very terrible illness. The medical profession for years has been telling us, we've got to get a more active lifestyle. Physical activity is a key part of staying healthy. Doctors will tell you it's the lowest cost prescription you can give anybody is to just get out and walk more, be more physically active, ride a bike. This is going back to the mid-90s, 1996, I believe, when the Surgeon General came out warning us of the dangers of sedentary lifestyle. 200,000 deaths per year attributed to physical inactivity. And we were starting to see that increase in seriously overweight youth, which has gotten much worse in the decades since. And, people have been told we need to do this, but guess what? Studies have shown that there is that 20% of the population that will seek out ways to be physically active, that will engage in regular and sustained activity, but the rest of us, and that includes myself, are not in that group. So the key challenge we all have is creating those environments where as part of our daily routine, we're getting the 30 to 60 minutes a day of physical activity that the doctors recommend. The medical profession made this point back in 1999, saying we've got to redesign our communities and retrofit them to permit walking or bicycling. This comes from an editorial in the Journal of the American Medical Association, hardly a radical organization. And yet they were warning of the problems of not doing more to create these physically active environments. The good news is we don't need to drive to the gym and get on the treadmill to do this. Physical activity need not be of a vigorous intensity for it to improve health. And we don't need to drive to the gym and take the escalator up to the 24-hour fitness. Now, I just got an email this week from one of my former colleagues telling me that these escalators are no longer there. So one small measure of progress. They took them out. Now people have to walk up the steps to get to the treadmill. We're really talking about 30 minutes of brisk walking a week, and we can break that up into smaller segments. It's not, you don't have to go out and do all 30 minutes at one time. I am told that after 30, if you want to keep the weight off, you're probably looking at more like 60 minutes a day of moderate physical activity. And there are different ways of doing that. So we need to create those opportunities for routine physical activity. And if you think about the trips that you make in your daily life, a lot of those trips that may be under a mile are easily trips that you could be making by walking. And if we're looking at trips that are maybe under 3 miles, and about 50% of trips on average are under 3 miles, those are easy bicycling trips. So it's not that difficult to start thinking of how we change our lifestyles to incorporate this physical activity. And of course, the doctors will tell us that it's better to exercise that 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day. The research is coming in. We're starting to see more and more studies. These are actually some of the early ones done in the Atlanta region, showing us that with higher density and more connectivity in communities, better community design, we see lower obesity rates. We also see, as part of that same study, less time spent in a car per day. We see the same thing, lower obesity rates. People who are not in their cars as much are walking, bicycling more. And if you look at our country and compare it to other countries, this is an interesting chart. Here's the obesity rate. So here's the US. We're up at that 25, actually probably closer to 30 now. And here's our percentage of walking, bicycling, or transit trips. And compare that to other countries in, other industrialized countries like, let's see, here's Netherlands, Denmark, where their obesity rates are much lower, their walking and transit and bicycling rates much higher. So it's fairly common sense. I mean, as we create these environments where people are more physically active, we're going to see those obesity and overweight rates drop. So what are the things we want to do in our communities to actually make these trips easy to do? How do we design and retrofit our communities to make it possible to have a really active lifestyle? I'm going to talk briefly about these 5 issues. One is the mix of land uses. If we don't have destinations close to where people live or work, it's hard to get them to walk. I mean, you'll get that 20% that engages in physical activity, doing the walk at lunch, but for the most part, People are not going to walk unless their destinations closer to where people live. And that doesn't only mean retail and shopping. It also means things like parks. Schools are a very critical part of that, having the schools in the neighborhood, mixing uses. And we used to do that really well in older parts of cities. Washington, D.C., you see that vertical mixed use with retail on the ground floor, housing above. This is an example from my city, Sacramento and Midtown, same thing, retail, restaurants on the ground floor, housing above. Small towns, I work in a lot of small towns in California, the same pattern of development. The retail on the ground floor, offices or housing above, and just one block off of Main Street is where all the housing is, so it's all close and proximate. We're seeing new examples. This was a project built several years ago in a college town in California, Davis, right across from their Central Park with a small restaurant, housing above. This is actually across the street from where I now live in Sacramento, where we have a mix of uses with retail, some restaurants, a yogurt place. One of the challenges of these environments is we get a lot of really good restaurants. And you have to sort of balance, try to not go into those restaurants too much. There's a great chocolate place, the specialty chocolates there too, which I have to really resist going into. But again, we have that mix of uses, destinations close to where people live. This happens to be Orange County, not a part of the country where you would expect downtown housing to work. The mayor, when this was built, told me that they really were very hesitant about putting housing above the retail. This is a new Main Street in Brea, California. And they hesitatingly put this housing in. And what they found was there was so much demand for it, they actually took another building on the corner that was going to have offices and put more housing above that. What we find is that more and more people are looking for these urban experiences and urban environments and want to live in these locations. You can also do horizontal mixed use. This is a supermarket fairly recently built in Salinas. These buildings over here are the housing that's next to it. And this is one in my city, a new Safeway also, where they built housing over one section of the supermarket, basically the section that has some additional stores. So we're seeing more examples of this type of mixed-use development. And of course, then there's the issue of the schools. This happens to be the school, housing right adjacent to it. And I do a fair amount of work with Safe Routes to School, and the good news is that a lot of elementary schools are built that way in most communities. They're close to where people live. They're usually pretty accessible, although we still see a lot of parents driving their kids to them. It gets harder with the upper grade schools, especially high schools. We start seeing these huge campuses. I worked in one town where they wanted to build a new high school. They had their existing high school on Main Street, really accessible. Kids could walk everywhere, even for their breaks at lunch. They could go out. They wanted to build a new high school 1 mile outside of town. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. And we're seeing developers embracing these concepts. This is from several years ago in the Urban Land magazine. Compact development is another challenge to creating these communities, is getting those nodes of development where we actually have more compactness, where people do live closer together. It doesn't mean every part of the community is built that way, but we need those nodes to have that higher density to make it work. And in California, we've done a lot of studies of this over the years, looking at the loss of agricultural land if we continue to sprawl out and develop at low density patterns. This from a 1990s study, the American Farmland Trust, showing all the land that would be lost in agriculture, and associated with that, billions of dollars in agricultural revenue, and also many dollars lost in the additional cost to local government of providing services, because the lower density development you have, the more it costs to provide all the infrastructure and services to those neighborhoods. So this is just a close-up of what was happening back then in Fresno, about 3 units to the acre, the amount of land that would be consumed, and a comparison with a slightly more dense pattern of 6 units to the acre, which is not all that dense, but just a big difference in the amount of land consumed in just this 45-year period. We know that to support transit effectively, we need those nodes of higher density development. If we don't have those areas where we have density at 20, 30 units to the acre, it's really hard, for example, to make light rail or any kind of bus rapid transit work. In more suburban areas, at least 7 units to the acre make it feasible for transit to start providing service there. We also know that to have the mix of uses, we need those higher densities. If you don't get slightly more rooftops nearby, retail, it's not going to be possible to support that. So for a small convenience store, about 7 units to the acre. For a larger, small supermarket, we need to get even more than that. And we see a lot of examples of this. This, again, from my city in Sacramento. These are small lot, single-family homes that were built on a vacant lot in the Midtown area called Metro Square. This has been in place for now 12, 15 years. Very, very popular. The property values in this community actually went up significantly after they were first built. And the redevelopment agency, which supported this project, said, well, we're not going to do that again because clearly the value is there and people will buy these. This is near downtown San Diego, where we see sort of a live-work type units where you can have your office on the ground floor, housing above. Great, examples of the types of different housing that we now need as more people are working out of their homes. And you can even have your garage there and keep it pretty minimal. Even Dallas, Texas has done this. This is near the downtown. Developer came along in the mid-90s, started building at higher densities in this neighborhood, and we've seen a lot of, thousands of people now live in that area. And because of that, we also see the support for the different amenities that you can now provide when you have higher density, like the pools, like the retail that comes along with that. This actually happens to be the building that I live in now. I used to live in first-ring suburb of Sacramento. It took a while for the market to actually catch up to the demand. We were looking for something like this when we moved to Sacramento 20 years ago, but it just didn't exist. And in the last 10 years, we've now seen developers build more of this type of housing. I now have a 10-minute walk to work, a lot easier than my 30-minute bike ride or 15, 20-minute car drive where I lived before. And of course, there's all of the amenities nearby, the restaurants, the shopping, everything is in walking distance. We've gone from a 2-car family to a 1-car family, no problem, because it's easy to get around without a car. And when you think about the new households that are forming over the next few decades, it's this type of housing that's going to appeal to them. We're seeing that less than, it's almost about only 10% of new households formed in 2005 to 2015 are going to be married couples with children. The types of households that might want that larger house, that might want the detached home with the yard. But many new households are single persons living alone, singles living together, and married couples without children. And that's a significant part of the market in the coming decades. Of course, having access to parks becomes really important. So even in very dense cities like New York, Boston, and so on, we see those park spaces as a very key part of making the density work. Site design simply means we've got to get the buildings at the back of the curb, at the back of the sidewalk, to create those walkable environments. We've got to get away from putting parking in the front of buildings. We've got to get the parking in the back, on the sides. And, take something like this, where you've got parking, a very unfriendly environment for pedestrians, and, you still have the parking there afterwards, but you've got the parking in the back, a little bit on the side. You now have an environment that becomes much more walk-friendly. Connectivity, a really key issue. I was talking to some of your planning staff earlier about some of the challenges in subdivisions with getting the streets to connect. As we get more cul-de-sacs and loops, we really increase the number of walk trips. And the reason is very simple. It takes, on average, we walk about 3 miles per hour. And if a destination is not close enough, if we don't have a direct route to it, most of the time we're going to give up on walking altogether. We're just simply going to get into our cars. So with a connected street network, it's easy for this family. It's only a quarter mile away from the school for that child to walk to school. There's clear connections. It's a short distance. But now when we've lost the connectivity, we're making that a quarter mile trip into a mile and a half. And now it's not an easy trip because we're now putting more of the volume of traffic out onto the arterial roadways around. Those are bigger streets, carrying more traffic, much more hostile environments. So now what's going to happen is the parent's going to drive that child. We're not going to see them walking to school. And on the way back, we've got 3 left turns. Every time we have a left turn, we have to start thinking of additional traffic controls, whether they're signals, stop controls, and so on. We've complicated the system. We've actually created a system where crashes are more likely because of those left-turning movements. And we're not dispersing the traffic. In this pattern, the traffic disperses very nicely. One street's closed off, you take the other street. With a well-connected street network, we can keep our streets narrow and small. Once we go to disconnected street networks, we end up with basically bigger and more hostile streets. And with low connectivity is where we get the 4, 6, 8 lane roadways that really are not environments where people are going to walk or bike, or where it's very difficult to walk or bike. We also get this situation where that street is maybe only used efficiently for the peak half hour or hour of the day. The rest of the time it's sitting vacant. We get these monster intersections where as a pedestrian you really hesitate and wonder if you're going to make it across. Just to compare what we used to do, here's Savannah, Georgia, 1 square mile compared to 1 mile of Walnut Creek. You notice the short blocks. Every one of these white squares is a park, so you have great access to parks. Excuse me. In this pattern, disconnected, much longer blocks, much more difficult to expect people to walk there. And finally, street design. We really want streets that are complete, that accommodate all the users: pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, motorists, travelers of all ages and abilities. And it's great to see more and more cities in Montana adopting complete streets policies. I know there's a big push on for that, and we're seeing that at the national scale as well. And it's really recognizing that these complete streets have to be context sensitive. It's going to be different whether you're out in the more rural areas where speeds are higher. As you come into town, you want the speeds to come down. You want narrower streets. You want a sense of enclosure. You want those trees. You want that furniture zone for all the stuff that needs to go on the street. We know that complete streets work well as long as we make the cars behave. The street needs to tell the car what's appropriate and what's permitted. And if a street is too wide, the motorist feels very comfortable going at high speeds. So on narrow, well-defined streets, we get speeds that are appropriate for residential areas, 15 to 25 miles per hour. With the wider streets and the bigger streets, we can go a little faster than that. We also obviously want great sidewalks, and that means having some separation between the sidewalk and the vehicle zone. And that also gives us a place to put all the stuff. That furniture zone is really key. We want that space to put not only the landscaping, but also the benches, the trash receptacles, the hydrants, the signs, all of those go out here. And the big advantage is we can now put the driveway slope in, for the driveway, and not interrupt the sidewalk the way we do when we have basically an attached sidewalk. Narrow sidewalks are great for young couples in love, but for average-sized folks, and we know this is becoming more the average, we need a little bit more space. So 5, 6 feet wide sidewalks at a minimum is what we need in our communities. Of course, in commercial areas, we need more space than that. We obviously also need great crossings. We need to make sure that it's easy to get across those streets, whether at the intersection or mid-block. And of course, medians, refuge islands work great. These were put in my neighborhood in Midtown Sacramento about 15 years ago. And it's just great to see cars slow down as they approach, yield to pedestrians a lot more than they do when they don't have that little obstacle in the middle of the street that slows them down. And of course, curb extensions, which shorten the crossing distance, slow the cars down, and also make visibility much better. Motorists can see the pedestrian about to cross, pedestrians can see the motorists. What are some of the trends? I'm going to end by just talking about how far have we come, and what are some of the things we've been able to accomplish. If we build the facilities for bicycles, for example, will people come? Will they use them? Really important there is looking at creating networks and making the case for investments in these. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of trips are less than 3 miles, and 25% of all trips are less than 1 mile. So we really need to capture those through walking and bicycling. The bicycling trip easily fits in there, walking trip here, and yet we're still seeing a lot of those trips being taken by car. So one good piece of news is that bicycle commuting has risen pretty significantly in this 8-year period from 2000 to 2008. We did see this big drop in bicycling and walking from the 60s to the 2000. Children bicycling and walking to school also dropped significantly, but we're starting to see a leveling off and now an increase in all that. And of course, if pedestrians had clout, this is what we'd like to see. The sidewalks plowed first. Minneapolis actually does a good job of plowing their trails as quickly as they plow their streets, because people do ride bicycles in the winter in Minneapolis, believe it or not. We still see a disproportionate share of fatalities that are pedestrians and bicyclists. In my state, we see almost 20% of fatalities every year as pedestrians, far more than the percentage of trips people are taking by walking. And these are national figures. 26.5% of urban fatalities are pedestrians, and 3% are bicyclists. So we've got to do better at creating the environments where people can safely walk and bike. The good news is that as more people get out there and bicycle and walk, we actually see a decline in those statistics. We start seeing, in this case, and this is actually, before I get to that, this is the Portland example where they've seen a quintupling of bicycling in 15 years. All of this done with about a $50 million investment, what it costs for one freeway mile. So what we like to see is that once they stop building the lane miles, the bikeway miles, the travel by bikes continues to go up. So if we build it, people are coming. They are using these facilities. Of course, we're still not spending anywhere near what, again, some of these European cities are. These are spending per capita in some of these countries. Portland, which is one of the best examples in the US, is still a small percentage of what we see in Europe. And as far as the safety is concerned, as more people are bicycling, and this comes from Marin, the collisions start to drop. Why? Because motorists get used to seeing them. We start actually building better facilities for those bicyclists. We see the same in Minneapolis. This is their numbers of bicycle commuters. This is the rate of crashes over that period of time. And what's amazing to me, and one of the challenges or one of the gauntlets that Minneapolis throws down, is they get almost 4% mode share from bicycling, which is phenomenal when you consider the weather there. I think that's, in California, we're not even anywhere near that with much, much better weather. So if Minneapolis can get that, we need to do it everywhere. A lot of other cities are doing this. I won't go through this in any detail. We're seeing increases in bicycling in lots of cities as a result, again, of better facilities and more people getting out there. Complete streets is something that's gotten strong support from people everywhere. We're seeing all surveys showing that people are tired of driving as much as they're driving. They'd like to see transit is growing faster than population. And there's still a third of the population that does not drive, which is, people often don't remember that. But a third of the population does not drive. They're children under 16, they're people who've decided not to drive, they're seniors. So that percentage of the population is an important one to provide for with complete streets. A lot of benefits from complete streets, from public safety, seniors, schools, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the list goes on. And I think that's the reason we've seen the growth in the complete streets movement. We also have to recognize that by implementing these strategies, we're actually reducing our health costs. And as an employer, for example, that's a big one to think about. If you can get more of your employees to actually get out there and be physically active, that's going to reduce your health premiums. Economic benefits, we know that a lot of these strategies result in pluses when it comes to the economy. More people spending time in these environments, spending their dollars, investing in those places, bringing back streets and neighborhoods. And we've seen that with lots of streets that have been rebuilt over the years where investment comes back to them. A recent study showing that we actually get more jobs created with bicycle and pedestrian projects than we do with road projects. So that's another thing to think about in this era of needing to focus on job creation. And finally, I think we really are at a transformative movement. We've had this faltering national economy for several years. Gas prices go up and down, but I think we all recognize that they're not going to go down for very long, that eventually they are going to keep going up. We're now starting to see complete streets as a strategy to address the obesity epidemic. We're seeing more awareness of the importance of quality of life as an economic engine. And of course, there's that small issue of climate change that we need to address, and more recognition that these strategies help to do that. So one important thing I'd like to do is just encourage you all to become more involved with the Complete Streets movement. There is a national coalition, the National Complete Streets Coalition, which has great resources and is doing a great job on this. And if in 1969 we could get a man to walk on the moon, we would hope that, and I guess we need to change that date, that today we could see more people walking on our streets. So the one shameless plug I'll make at the end of my presentation is to encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about this, to attend this national conference that we put on every year. The next one is in a fairly nice place, San Diego, in February of all times. And we get about 1,500 to 2,000 people attending this conference, discussing these issues, figuring out what to do in their communities to make this all work better. So with that, I don't know if I have time for some questions or if you've got to jump into the...
Yeah, thank you, Paul. We do have time for some questions before our awards presentation. I'm happy to float around with the microphone. Does anyone have any questions for Paul? A lot of information he covered for us on not only design and things we can implement as a community, but things we can also see in Missoula as good examples and share with other communities. We do have a Complete Streets resolution here in Missoula for the city, and the county is working on theirs. So we encourage continued conversation with the county commissioners, and we do have two here today, about that Complete Streets resolution. So we still have room for improvement in Missoula, and yet we've also implemented a lot of the ideas and suggestions Paul has. So I do open it up. Nancy.
Okay. Oh, Nancy Wilson. I'm with the Associated Students of the University of Montana. One of the kind of dilemmas with Complete Streets are that it kind of gets bought on as how do we make a mega road? Because, okay, we'll still have our 5-lane road, but now we're going to throw in bike lanes and sidewalks, so it should be fine, right? But then we get intersection that is like the pictures you were showing. So I struggle with supporting Complete Streets, especially some of the design elements even you were talking about. Lots of times boulevard sidewalks make it an impossible street because you're going to be tearing down too much of the community to develop a street like that. So I appreciated your discussion of context-sensitive Complete Streets, but I'd like a little more information from you about how do you address that?
Well, first of all, Complete Streets is extremely context sensitive. So when you talk about a 5-lane road where we may have to add X, Y, or Z, I mean, it's going to depend on the context. Is it part of the, is that the part of the bicycle network? Is that where we want, bicyclists to circulate? What are the best, what are some of the best routes for bicyclists in a community? We also have to recognize that a lot of what we're doing, especially if we're doing retrofits, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about, with retrofits, we have to look for opportunities that, are not there when we're building new. So sometimes that can mean things like narrowing lane widths. We're seeing a lot of streets that are built with lanes that are freeway standard, 12-foot lanes. There is nothing in the literature, in the research that's been done that shows us that in an urban environment with speeds in the 40, 45 mile per hour range, that 12-foot lanes are any better or more efficient or safer than 10-foot lanes. So some of the transformations we're seeing with Complete Streets are actually where we're saying, well, next time we have to resurface a street, let's narrow down the lanes a bit and fit in a bike lane. We're not having to tear anything up. We're working within the existing curb lines. A lot of the work that I do in communities where we go in and develop a plan for them is looking at what can we do that's low cost, easy to implement, that works within your existing curb-to-curb space or your existing right-of-way without adding a very costly retrofit. The other thing with complete streets is, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's a process. It's going to take time. We just have to incorporate into our transportation policies ways to examine each time we are touching a street, whether it's to maintain it, to resurface it. What is it that we can do to make the street work better for everybody? We're not taking away, we're trying to make it work better for more people. So I think if you look more closely at the complete streets philosophy, it really should not in any way contradict what you're trying to do, which is to create environments where more people feel more comfortable on the streets. Yeah.
And the person that spends much of my time trying to convince folks that they should be doing this. Examples of messaging that you found effective in communities when talking to the naysayers about the importance of investing in the infrastructure for active transportation?
To me, one of the things you can look at is actually show them the statistics of how much we actually do spend on active transportation. Does anybody know what percentage of our transportation dollars are spent on bicycling and walking? Any guesses? There's probably a few people here who know. Yeah. 1%. It's about 1 to 2%. And yet there was a survey done a few years ago by, I think it was the Rails to Trails Conservancy, that asked people, how would you like to spend our transportation dollars? And most people answered, about 27%, 30% for bicycling and walking. Still about 40% for highways and roads, and another 30% for transit. So when you ask people, how would you like to see transportation dollars spent, a lot of people do understand that it's even if I'm driving my car most of the time and I'm not using transit, it helps me if other people in my community are able to have those choices, because then there'll be less traffic on the road for me. That was one marketing strategy that the Salt Lake City region used years ago when they were developing their transit system, was basically to make the case, if more people have more choices and can take transit, then even if you're driving your car, you won't have as much congestion on the roads. But to me, it ultimately comes down to a question of democracy. We live in a democratic system. A third of our population does not drive. It seems to me that we should be able to spend resources in a more equitable way on all the different modes, including modes that are appropriate for a third of the population. Yeah. Uh-oh, Jim. No.
I'm not going to ask you a question, but just remind people that right now we're going into the design of a really important arterial. It's Russell Street, and the City Council is really doing a great job of pushing for citizen involvement, because it's going to be a joint project between the state and the city. Mm-hmm. And so that design process will begin in the next few months, we hope. And so all the things that Paul is talking about, the lane widths and the boulevard design, all that stuff will be the make or break between whether we have to widen Russell in a big way or keep it within its current curb-to-curb configuration. So we'll really need a lot of people to voice their opinions on what they want, because it will have a big impact on the businesses that have located there, and then also what it'll be like to walk or bike along that corridor. So that's going to happen really soon. It'll be the biggest road project in Missoula probably for the next 50 years. So.
And one point to make on that is that when we're looking at widening, it's usually the intersections that are failing. I mean, we can carry a lot of traffic between intersections on a roadway, but it's at the intersections that we really reduce the capacity of the roadway. So making intersections work efficiently is often a great way to try to solve that problem. And some cities, there's one case that I've worked, that some of my colleagues have worked on in the San Diego area, where they had a 5-lane roadway. This is La Jolla Boulevard in Bird Rock. And they actually wanted to develop more housing on it. They wanted to make it a more walkable environment. They didn't feel they could do that with 5 lanes. So they actually now, and they had 23,000 cars a day on this roadway. they actually were able to narrow it down to 2 lanes and added more parking, diagonal parking on one side. And the reason it worked was that they put in 5 roundabouts at the intersections. And the roundabouts work more efficiently. They move 30% more traffic through the intersection. That made it possible not only to not widen the road, in this case they were actually able to narrow it down from 5 lanes to 2. And it has brought a whole new level of investment to that street. New housing has been built, there's new stores opening, new restaurants. It's totally transformed that environment. So in some cases, the best solution is not to look at the straightaways. That's often not where the problem is. It's at the intersections that we need to find solutions. And the other option is more network. If there are more options, more ways to disperse the traffic, then it doesn't all have to be loaded onto that one road. So good luck with that process.
Any final questions for Paul and/or comments? All right. Well, thank you, Paul, very much. We appreciate you braving Montana winter to join us here. Ben will be helping us with our next portion of the program, which is our awards portion. Part of my staff here, actually, I'd like to acknowledge them. Jennifer Thompson. Sherry Lewis, who is not here, but she is the one who sends you all the emails and correspondence and also keeps our office moving smoothly. So please, a round of applause for Sherry. And finally, our newest addition to the team has been Ben Weiss. And Ben, take it away.
Thanks, Alex. I notice a few elected officials or recently elected officials in the audience today, and I want to thank you for coming. But 2 in particular I want to invite up here on stage with me to help hand out the awards. Bill Carey and Michelle Landquist, our county commissioners. And Alex, we can bring a chair up here for you if you want, but we need you here as well. Thank you, Paul, for visiting with us today and helping celebrate the efforts and achievements our local businesses and organizations have made in encouraging sustainable transportation. This is the 13th annual Transportation Best Practices Awards and the 3rd one that I have been to. Each year, as the benefits of increased transportation options are realized, nominees seem to continually raise the bar. It's been great to see how much all of these businesses and organizations value the health of their staff, clients, and community. In the interest of time, could the representatives from each nominee come forward when they first hear their group's name? I'll keep talking about them. Maybe we can even get them to blush. Not all of the nominees are employers. Starting last year with the Downtown Consortium's nomination for the Higgins Streetscape renovation, we have seen an increased awareness of the many benefits of infrastructure and providing access and options for all people. It's a lot of what Paul was talking about. This year, we have 2 such nominations. Our first nomination comes from a volunteer organization for their work on what our judges declared to be the best new project in Missoula. The Milwaukee Trail Extension provides access all the way across town for cyclists, pedestrians, and wheelchairs. The River Road Neighborhood Leadership Team worked closely with their neighbors and with Parks and Rec to negotiate, plan, and complete construction on this integral piece of the transportation puzzle. They made signs to encourage positive use of the trail and threw an awesome party for its grand opening. Yeah, Jeremy, come on up. Melissa, too. Not only does the Milwaukee branch now connect downtown to west of Reserve Street and vice versa, it also makes for a very fun bike ride. For these reasons, a citizen proudly nominated the River Road Leadership Team. Please join me in congratulating Jeremy Flesch and Melissa Steinecke on behalf of the River Road Neighborhood Leadership Team. Thanks, guys. Our second nomination also comes from a citizen, though he does have planning experience and is in fact now an elected official. Alex Taft nominated the City of Missoula Public Works Department for a variety of projects completed this year that helped improve facilities for cyclists and, by extension, everyone. When people are riding bikes, there are fewer cars on the road when we need to drive. The construction projects Public Works completed this year calm traffic, reduce conflict, and in many ways increase predictability for all users of the roadway. The Arthur 5th 6th Maurice redesign improves traffic flow around the university while providing cyclists and pedestrians with more clearly defined routes. The hundreds of sharrows painted along the bike routes remind drivers of the potential of cyclists in the road and reassures cyclists that the road is in fact for them as well. Long-term epoxy striping of existing bike lanes reinforces established routes while saving the taxpayers money on costly paint jobs. For these reasons, the City of Missoula Public Works Department received a nomination for the Best Practices Award. Greg Wood is here on behalf of the department. Please join me in congratulating him. Our next nominee is also a provider of a public service that this year went above and beyond to approve its own services and to connect to other modes of sustainable transportation. Under the direction of a new general manager and stewardship of a dedicated board, Mountain Line introduced free Wi-Fi on all of its buses, bus tracker technology so customers can locate buses in real time, and a 31-day pass to replace the month pass, allowing more flexibility for its customers. They published a document, Transit Guidelines and Project Development for use by developers and government agencies to coordinate land use and transportation policies and to promote the importance of planning for transportation options. 2011 included record ridership for Mountain Line as well as the award of a livability grant to upgrade to 3-slot bike carriers on all buses, to buy 36 bike racks to be installed at bus stops throughout the community, and to construct a bike station adjacent to the transfer center. This bike station will feature secure bike parking, day-use lockers, and a self-service repair station, complete with bike part vending machine, bike mounting pedestal with tools, and an air compressor. Phew. Let's give Mountain Line a round of applause. Thank you.
I'll text all our operators since we have Wi-Fi now.
Over the years, we've had several branches of the Forest Service nominated, and some of them have even won the award. This year, it is the turn for Rocky Mountain Research Station. The agency has a non-taxable transportation subsidy program that reimburses employees the cost of fees for using various public transportation options, particularly Mountain Line and the iRide van pool. They also have commuter bicycle subsidy benefit program, also non-taxable, to reimburse employees who bike the cost of bicycle equipment and maintenance. Employees are allowed to adjust work hours to accommodate transportation needs and are encouraged to participate in their telework program. More and more employees are taking them up on it. Thank you, Roxanne Lyson and Penny Bertram, for your commitment to sustainable transportation. The next nominee has been promoting sustainable transportation since their inception in 1999. Every year, the Missoula Osprey seeks to improve current programs to further encourage fans to bike, walk, and carpool to the stadium. Their partnership with Missoula in Motion has led to the introduction of Bike to the Ballpark Nights and the Osprey Bike Club, which in its second year has raised enough money for a new bike rack. As an event center, the organization has implemented travel and parking demand management plans, including chartered shuttle service and encouragement of non-motorized travel. The Osprey arranges for a shuttle for players that live at the Hawthorne Suites, and this year they purchased 2 bikes for office use by staff. Join me in giving a hand to Byron Dyke on behalf of the Missoula Osprey. Next up is a nominee whose main business is educating about and advocating for the benefits of bicycle travel. As the leading organization promoting long-distance bike travel with over 40,000 members worldwide, Adventure Cycling has helped make Missoula a magnet for touring cyclists. Staff members are provided with MDA Easy Passes, ample secure bike parking, shower and changing facilities, good deals on bikes and parks, and 2 office bikes, 1 foldable for use on business trips in other parts of the country and world. They have taken to it so well that 29 of the 32 employees are Way to Go Club members. They have created a bicycle tourist map of Missoula and have frequently taken the opportunity to expound on the virtues of the bicycle in the community. Their employees feel strongly enough about their mission that we received 2 nominations from them. Help me give a round of applause to Jim Sayer, Madeline McKinney, and Alex Campbell with the Adventure Cycling Association. You'll find the next nominee pretty close to Adventure Cycling in both your program and the phone book. Adventure Life is an eco-tourism company providing small group tours that have a positive impact on the local culture and environment. They are based in Missoula and maintain an office of about 16 people, nearly all of whom are Way to Go Club members. This year, Adventure Life prepared for the Commuter Challenge early by hosting an internal challenge for the month of April, leading up to a week of perfect participation and being crowned co-commuter champions this year. Commuter co-champions? I've yet to figure that out. Other internal incentives include reimbursement up to $150 a year for bus passes or bike maintenance and accessories, and the option to telecommute. Their office manager provides on-site support for new staff to figure out carpooling and bus route options, and she happens to be here to accept the nomination for Adventure Life. Congratulations, Lynessa Nelson and Adventure Life, on your nomination. The next nominee is our first award winner. Although many past winners continue to refine... Oh. Well, I skipped one. Here we go. They were after Mountain Line. The next nominee helped Mountain Line with that grant application that they won by donating their time and expertise to design the bike station. MacArthur Means and Wells Architects have been committed to encouraging their employees to explore transportation options for several years, offering $1 a day for non-single occupant vehicle commutes, MDA Easy Passes, and schedule flexibility to accommodate bus schedules. MMW participates in MIM's annual commuter challenge and has won it 2 years out of the past 3, I believe. They increasingly attend continuing education seminars and business meetings on foot, on bike, and online. Transportation is but one component of their sustainable business practices, and it is among their best. Please join me in congratulating MacArthur Means and Wells Architects on their nomination. I got so exhausted reading through that list of things that the Mountain Line Grant is going to fund. I just had to flip the page. So the next nominee is our first award winner. Although many past winners continue to refine and improve their transportation programs with the help of the Best Practices Award, Ecology Project International has taken their commitment to reducing vehicle miles traveled and traffic congestion to new levels by thinking outside of their office walls. EPI maintains an office bike for daily errands and even rents bikes from MIST, the Missoula Institute for Sustainable Transportation, when visitors come to town. This year, EPI installed additional bike parking and a building-wide video teleconferencing system, encouraging all their tenants to not only use their facilities, but to participate in the commuter challenge as well. They, as a building, as a unit, have received the benefits of reduced carbon consumption. EPI's efforts have been recognized and adopted by partner organizations worldwide while they continue to inspire businesses and organizations locally. For these reasons and more, we are proud to present Ecology Project International with a Continued Excellence Award. With the award, they are also receiving Adventure Cycling Association memberships and magazines. Next up, Missoula Aging Services chose its current location because of its proximity to several Mountain Line routes and offers easy passes to both employees and volunteers. Missoula Aging Services provides internal incentives for sustainable commuters by holding monthly raffles for prizes such as gift cards, bike lights, and books. With fewer parking spaces than employees, Aging Services is aware of their impact on their parking footprint on the surrounding neighborhood, and they make an effort to minimize overflow parking by encouraging carpooling, walking, and biking. This year, Aging Services piloted a loaner bike program, keeping 2 bikes with the helmets, panniers, locks, and lights in-house for staff to use during the day for work-related and personal trips. Help us in celebrating Ann Andre and Alicia Crandall and Missoula Aging Services for their honorable mention for the many ways they promote sustainable transportation. Yeah, part of their award is that giant check right there. No. It's hard to ride in a bike lane, too, with that, carrying it. First-time nominee Mountain Home Montana put together a strong nomination with their incorporation of sustainable transportation principles into their campus improvements, as well as the community-focused approach of their services. Mountain Home Montana provides housing and support services to pregnant and/or parenting young women ages 16 to 24. Among other life skills, Mountain Home teaches these young families how to use sustainable transportation. All of the families are members of the Easy Pass program and are required to learn how to use the bus to access community resources. Mountain Home Montana also has bikes, bike trailers, and child safety seats available for both residents and staff to use for appointments, daycare, and work. Completion of a new building this year included covered bike racks, improved parking for designated vanpool vans, and a tricycle path in the playground to get kids started early. Mountain Home Montana also allows flexible scheduling to accommodate bus commuters, and one employee saves a trip to town by sleeping at work between 12-hour sessions once a week. Recognize the importance of transportation options. Mountain Home Montana staff and residents have spent over 30 hours participating in community action efforts to improve busing, biking, and walking facilities in their immediate neighborhood. As winners of the second place award, Mountain Home Montana will receive a $600 cash prize in the form of this also huge check. And they plan to use it to provide additional bikes and trailers for their moms, forward-facing child seats, and age-appropriate helmets. Congratulations, Gypsy Holland and the rest of Mountain Home Montana. So that brings us to our grand champion. I imagine that you all have figured out by now, by looking at who is left in the program, Garlington Loan & Robinson has displayed a holistic commitment to sustainable transportation this year. From initiating programs and facilities for employees to implementing enhancements and policies for clients and colleagues, Garlington Loan & Robinson provides an exemplary model to the community. In 2011, the law firm completed construction and moved into its new building downtown. This building earned LEED Gold certification in part because of the inclusion of indoor bike storage, shower, and changing facilities, and the decision to build downtown, 1 block away from the Mountain Line Transfer Center, without adding any parking. I even heard a rumor that the shower and bike facilities were the first things drawn on in the plans for the new building. I don't know if I buy that, but... During construction, parking was highly impacted, and many employees shifted to alternate modes of transportation. Through the recent implementation of a pre-tax commuter benefit program, many employees continue to commute in other ways than alone in a car. GLR also installed a video conferencing system, allowing the firm to attend meetings and even court appearances without driving or flying. Congratulations, Doug Maves, Joan Feely, and Garlington Loan & Robinson. You are the 2011 Transportation Best Practices Awards Grand Champion. Okay. If the award winners could stay for just a few minutes afterwards, we'd like to get a few more photos of you. Post them all over our website and Facebook page and everything. Thank you, commissioners, for helping hand out the awards. Thank you again to all the nominees, too. Your enthusiasm for finding other ways to get to work and around town keeps us going. We know that you have a lot to think about every day and that transportation can be low on the priority list. We appreciate that you make time and effort to not only think about it, but to act in ways that benefit yourselves, your employees, and your community. Keep those programs evolving. Keep logging your trips in the Way to Go Club. I hear they have some cool prizes for next year. Keep asking questions. If you want to figure out the bus schedule, if you need to plan a bike route, if you want to stay informed about improvement projects in and around town, just let us know. Our next event is our Employer Partner Breakfast happening March 22nd, and by then we'll already be gearing up for the Commuter Challenge. So thank you everyone for coming today. We hope you were full, happy, and inspired. Looks like there's still some desserts over there.